Welcome this afternoon here in Tokyo, and good morning to those of you who are participating online from Europe. We are here together today to talk about flexibility, listen to some of the experiences that we have seen from the Danish side, and also hear about the status of flexibility and integration of variable renewable energy in Japan. My name is Sune Strøm, and I'm working as an energy advisor at the Danish embassy here in Tokyo. I will guide you through the day as you are basically come and announce who will speak, so be your guides. And actually, first of all, I have to say that I'm a little bit sorry. Actually, I'm very sorry to let you know that that our ambassador, who was supposed to say some welcoming remarks, is unfortunately not able to be here today. So I will read up his words. So, dear participants, again here in Tokyo, and of those of you who are participating online, on behalf of the Danish ambassador to Japan, Peter Taksøe Jensen, I have got the honor to open this event, where we will talk about the integration of renewable electricity. It can be wind power, it can be solar, and how we have done that in Denmark. And this about renewable energy is just as we're facing this energy crisis due to Russia's aggression in Ukraine, which besides the tremendous human cost and suffering, it has also heavily impacted the energy markets, creating insecurity of supply, resulting in very high prices. And this impacts us all. And there's no doubt in our mind that renewable energy here is one of the responses that you can look into. The Danish government has, together with its neighboring countries around the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, in June and recently last week, made two declarations where they are focusing on building out even more offshore wind in the North Sea and in the Baltic Sea as a clear energy policy response to Russia's aggressions. But also, of course, speeding up the decarbonization of our societies. Japan and Denmark have agreed on a memorandum of collaboration in this spring, where we are focusing on offshore wind energy, and we are focusing on integration of variable renewables. And this is about sharing the experiences and the knowledge, and for me, in my mind, that is the core of what we are going to do today at this seminar. To put it short, together in collaboration, we can make it a bit easier for ourselves to move forward on decarbonizing our societies and reduce our energy import dependencies. One thing is listening to me. Another thing is actually listening to the gentleman who is tasked to ensure the continued decarbonization of the Danish energy system, and at the same time steer Denmark safely through the current turbulent energy situation. I'm therefore particularly glad that we today have Director General Christoffer Bøtzau from the Danish Energy to present. He will share some key points on how we have ensured sufficient flexibility in the Danish electricity system without compromising security of supply. Director General Christoffer Bøtzau will also talk about how we continuously have increased our flexibility in the system along the way with more and more variable renewables in it. From the 70s, where we actually connected the first, what we call the modern wind turbines to our grid, very small 20, 30 kilowatt turbines, until the today, where we have approximately 50% of our electricity generation is coming from wind power, and then how we will continue towards 100% renewable electricity within the next 8 years. I'm also personally looking forward to learn more about the status and the coming steps in Japan, how Japan is planning to integrate more and more variable renewables. We all know the plans from the basic energy plan that there will come in the coming years, a lot more solar PV, and also start to come more onshore and also offshore wind power to Japan. To shed light on these topics, we have Oyama-sama from Octo and Shinkawa-sama from Electricity, Gas and Surveillance Commission to speak about these topics. In the final part of our seminar, we will also have a panel debate where Japanese and Danish experts will have a closer dialogue on the status and solution challenges that we are facing when we integrate more renewables. This panel will be moderated by Mika Obayashi from the Renewable Energy Institute. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank Renewable Energy Institute for our collaboration on this event and also allowing us to learn from the Renewable Energy Institute's chair of the executive board, Mr. Koberger, who will speak on the topic about flexible grid and power systems for 100% renewables. At last, let me stress that my colleagues at the Danish Embassy and myself are looking forward to continue our good collaboration on the topics of energy, such as offshore wind integration and how to decarbonize our energy systems. Please enjoy today's seminar, and let's continue the dialogue also after today. And now, please welcome Mr. Christoffer Bøtzau, Director General of the Danish Energy Agency. The stage is yours.
Hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's my first visit to Tokyo and Japan. And I'm sure that it's not my only visit. I think that we have so much in common and so many obstacles and visions to share. And going in a climate neutral society path, we need to do it together. To share the do's and the don'ts, and to share the knowledge between our two countries. And for me, this is the beginning of this. So I will give a short introduction to what you can call the flexibility of the Danish power system. My agenda is a short introduction to the development of variable renewable energy share and the energy system in Denmark, how it is to be responsible for an energy system with more than 50% wind, the status of the electricity mix and sector coupling and flexibility, and a closer look to why renewable energy does not compromise the system security, and our expectation for the future development of renewable energy. But let's start 50 years ago with the first oil crisis. And it hit Denmark very hard. We were 99% dependent on foreign fossil fuels. And some of the way to solve this problem was to announce car-free Sundays. And that was why the little boy at the picture could go and play at some of the highways. Today, as we all know, we are actually in a new energy crisis, especially in Europe, where the war and the invasion from Russia in Ukraine have hit the European energy markets very hard, closing more and more export from Russia towards Europe in the gas market, and causing very high gas and electricity prices at the moment. But Europe, and especially Denmark, stands stronger today than 50 years ago because we have been introducing a lot of renewable energy into our system. And that's also some of the lessons, that having a lot of renewable energy, even though it's viable, gives you much more independence than if you have fossil fuel that you need to import. And we started up 40 years ago, in the 80s, having a very centralized energy system. And the red dots are the large combined heat and power plants. And as you can see, centralized, a few transmission lines, and dependent on coal, gas, and oil. And if you look to the next map, you can see that it's a much more decentralized system. It's from 2015. We have a lot of renewable energy. We have a lot of district heating in the rural areas. And we have fewer large-scale combined heat and power plants. And at the same time, we have much more grid and many more interconnectors to our neighboring countries. And if you look at the last map, it's a future map, actually, because it's also introducing the energy islands. I'll come back to that later on. But the future for Europe is to be connected to each other, to connect the energy system within your country and connect the energy systems between the countries. So we can gain of the renewable energy in UK, on France, when it's windy there, and they can gain from the renewable energy in Denmark, and especially our offshore wind in the future. And you can see the development of energy policy in Denmark in at least 5 periods and in 5 themes. Let's take the first one. It's the flexible thermal power plant. It has been very important that our power plants are not the base load, but are the balancing part of the energy system. So when you have enough wind, when you have enough sun, you can scale down your power plant production and maybe only produce heat. At the same time, the flexible power plants are ready for the price signals. So for the last 40 years, we have been making a power plant fleet that is flexible and that is market-based. We have also been utilizing interconnectors, and we are building more at the moment. At the moment, we are building the Viking link towards UK, and we will build links towards Belgium and Germany in the years to come. Another very important part in having so much wind in the energy system is to be good in forecasting. Because the wind is controlled by the weather, so you need very good weather forecast. But at the moment we have excellent weather forecasts, and by that excellent forecast of the energy production 48 hours ahead. So bringing the wind production and sun production into the energy market gives you the possibility of having other balancing technologies opening up when you do not have the wind, and you have the possibilities of scaling down the combined heat and power plants when you have enough wind in your system. And this forecasting means that when we have a good windy day in Denmark, maybe in the winter time. We produce enough wind from our wind farms to cover all the consumption in Denmark. And at the same time, export the rest to our neighboring countries. The fourth one is sector coupling. We have a lot of district heating in our energy system, and combining power generation and district heating is very important. So you can use district heating as kind of a storage when you have enough wind, introducing large-scale heat pumps. And in the years to come, and it's not many years, maybe it's 2 or 3 years, we will have several projects for power to X coming up in our energy system, large scale, 1 gigawatt each, that will do even more sector coupling. And this is also part of the demand side flexibility, that we send clear price signals to the customers. Could be large-scale industries, could be district heating, large-scale heat pumps, and will be, in the future, power to X. And going in this climate neutral society way, we try all the time to look at the energy trilemma, that we are able to generate green energy, which is affordable for the consumers, and still at a very high level of security of supply. And maybe you can see it here at the right side. You can see the outage minutes. And at the moment, it's about 20 minutes per year that an average Dane cannot expect to have power in the switch. It gives us a security of supply at 99.996% at a year. But we expect the numbers to be a little bit higher, up to 30 minutes per year, as we go along, introducing more and more renewables. But it tells me that even though we have more than 50% of our power generated by wind, we are still able to have very high security of supply. And then the third part of the energy trilemma, the price. Is it affordable? Is it payable for the consumers? And here you see the average electricity prices for the European countries, excluding VAT and taxes. And you can see the red line, that's Denmark, and the red triangle, that's the average price. So actually we are below the average price in Denmark. It tells me that it's able to have low consumer prices and having renewables in your energy system at the same time. And in a time like now, where we have an energy crisis in Europe, it's very good to have this renewable energy, because when it's windy, when it's sun, the energy prices are low still, because in Denmark they produce enough for the entire consumption. And we have introduced very clear price signals for having this flexibility in the energy system. And as you can see here below, you can see the power generation. The light blue at the bottom is import. Then you have some combined heat and power plants. That's the gray ones. And then you have wind, red, and solar, red, and wind, blue, dark blue. And when we have a lot of wind in our power system, the prices are low. And then, as you can see at the top, that's where the electric boilers start boiling. So having these price signals, giving a clear incentive for the electric boilers to start up when the prices are low, and you can see we are close to negative prices actually at the Sunday, and the boilers are up and running. So it gives you the flexibility in the system. And in the future, for the next 10 years, we have a vision of building energy islands to use the potential of offshore wind. And if you look at the North Sea, the sea between Denmark and UK, our potential for offshore wind is more than 50 gigawatt, meaning that we can produce enough electricity for more than 50 million Europeans. And we will start building an artificial island in the middle of the North Sea, which will be a hub for 10 gigawatt. And that's more electricity than is needed in Denmark. So we will start building an offshore grid connected to Belgium at first, but I believe that it will be connected to Germany, Netherlands, UK, Norway, maybe France in the decades to come. And it will not be the only island. Our neighboring countries are also looking at this, because then you can go up in scale. Then you can have economies of scale from the offshore wind and bringing down the costs. We're also building a smaller one at the Baltic Sea, but the island is already there. So it's not an artificial island as in the North Sea. And having so much offshore wind also gives you the possibility of going from direct electrification, as we know today, using electricity for the electricity system, but also for electric vehicles, for heat pumps, etc., and go into indirect electrification, the hard abate sectors, the heavy transport, aviation, shipping, where we cannot use electricity directly. And combining the energy islands and large-scale offshore wind with Power-to-X gives you the possibility of greening the hard abate sectors. So the flexibility of the energy system is based on incentives through price signals, district heating and electrification. Renewables is not to compromise the energy system security. And then we try to push the boundaries at the moment with the energy islands and technologies like Power-to-X. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bøtzau. And actually, sorry, I forgot to tell you something in the beginning. I hope you figured it out. Channel 1 was Nihongo, and channel 2 is English. And for those of you who are using Zoom at home or in your office, then just use the language buttons in the top of the panel. Now we will continue on with Mr. Kåberger, who is the chair of the executive board at Renewable Energy Institute, and he will speak about a 100% renewable energy system and the flexibility of that. Please, Mr. Kåberger.
Thank you. I hope I'm visible. Thank you, Sune, for the introduction, and most of all, thank you, Christopher Bøtzau, for describing what has been done and achieved in Denmark. Denmark is indeed one of the pioneering countries with the early ambition to build a renewable supplied electricity system, and also pioneering in the wind power industry development, still making up a significant export industry for Denmark as a result of being an early mover. What is now the key issue in the introduction of large share of renewables in electricity grid is to manage efficiently the fact that cheap solar and wind power can always outcompete fossil fueled and even nuclear generators when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, and the sun is shining, but when the variation of the solar and wind is taken into account, the management of the total system to some will appear a bit challenging. But Denmark and now some other countries in the world have managed to deal with this by managing flexibility. Stability for the consumers is based on flexibility among the grid operators. Stability for the consumers depend on flexibility among those who are active in supplying electricity and managing the electricity grid. We heard Christopher describe one of the early important mechanisms in Denmark, where periods with high availability of very cheap, marginal cost, almost zero wind power has been used to substitute fossil fuels, and for that matter nowadays also biomass, in the generation of heat. So when electricity is cheaper than the fuels, you use electricity to produce the hot water for the district heating systems that would otherwise be produced by fuels. And then, on the other hand, when electricity becomes scarce because there is little wind and solar in Denmark, you will use fuels in the cogeneration plants to supply the heat, but also to produce electricity. And this is an excellent way, driven by the market prices, to create a stable output for the consumers by using flexibility amongst the suppliers. But there are also other challenges in the electricity grid, those that have to do with stability in the shorter time frame, the sort of fraction of a seconds to seconds and maybe minutes. And there are other countries in the world also contributing now to a rapid development, particularly in countries with a large share of solar electricity, such as Australia, parts of the United States, where batteries have been deployed in the electricity grid, providing very cheap control of frequency and voltage in the electricity grid, but at the same time being able to store electricity from noon to evenings and early mornings when electricity demand is significant. But again, the important thing is that for the customers, the electricity becomes even more stable, prices become less fluctuating than when the fluctuations in price depended entirely on the variations in demand. But to get this stable situation for the customers requires flexibility among those who provide the electricity and those who operate the electricity grid. But new technologies have made this easier, and we see how the cost of short-term power and frequency, voltage and frequency control is actually dropping. That is now the case, for example, in Germany, with less big power generators and more distributed renewables together with batteries. We see how the cost of managing a stable electricity grid is being reduced. Again, stability for the end consumers is improving while because of flexibility among those who provide the electricity and operate the system. This will continue, but it is important that the new technological opportunities available from sector coupling, using electricity in sectors that were traditionally run by fossil fuels, in an economic way, create stability. The deployment of modern control technology, power electronics, and batteries, for example, are extremely important. And also, as we heard from Denmark, the ability to exchange electricity over different geographical regions is a very effective way of reducing the cost of total energy supply, because wind and solar is not only varying in time, but also varying over geographical distance, and a way to help each other between regions and countries by exchanging electricity is a good way of reducing the cost for everyone. So with this, I would like to again thank the German collaborators for supporting us in this seminar and to tell the story of the real world experience of increasing renewables and showing the way towards a completely renewable electricity supply, making countries that were traditionally dependent on a large share of import of their energies, such as Japan, such as Denmark, to become independent and at the same time avoid contributing to climate change and have a long-term sustainable energy supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koberger. And basically, Thomas, I would like to say that it was good that you mentioned Germany in your speech, as then I have the opportunity to say that that in Denmark, one of the things that we are, as Mr. Bøtzer was talking about, is basically to expand to a level of offshore wind that exceeds our own needs, but that means that we will also start contributing even further to the decarbonization of Europe, especially our neighboring countries, just as Germany. But now, not so much more about Europe and Denmark, but more about Japan. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Oyama, who is president of OCTO, on the stage. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I am Oyama, president of OCTO. I will be talking about the various initiatives in the grid system to introduce renewable energy in Japan. These are the agenda items that I will be touching upon. First of all, I will introduce our organization, OCTO, give you the overview of OCTO. Secondly, speak about the status quo of the power system in Japan. And thirdly, I will touch upon the master plan of transmission system expansion, which is called Manage and Connect. How do we expand the transmission system? Master plan is under study at the moment, and therefore the third topic would be the master plan. First, our organization, OCTO, which stands for Organization for Cross-Regional Coordination of Transmission Operators. Great East Japan earthquake occurred in March 2011. As written at the top of this page, this was an unprecedented catastrophe, and a large-scale blackout occurred in eastern Japan due to power shortage. And that truly reminded us of the restriction of transmission capacity in the power system. And after experiencing that, we decided to proceed with the electricity system reform in Japan by setting up the 3 goals as indicated on this page. The first goal, securing stable electricity supply. Second, suppressing electricity rates to the maximum extent possible. And thirdly, expanding choices for consumers and business opportunities. The second and third goals are quite simple goals, easy to understand, but doing 2 and 3 and at the same time securing electricity supply is quite a big challenge. And in order to achieve these goals, we have set up 3 steps. And under the first step, our organization OCTO was established. Our mission is to promote coordination of transmission operators on cross-regional basis and enhance resilience of the power system. So our organization was established to fulfill the first of the three goals. So what is the role of OCTO? There are mainly three missions of OCTO. First, to secure short, middle to long-term stable supply of power. We aggregate all of the supply plans of all operators, and at the same time, we prepare the long-term development policy of cross-regional network and network development plans, and secure stable supply at the national level, not only in the short term, but in the mid to long term. And secondly, promote fair, equitable, and efficient use of transmission and distribution equipment facilities. So guidelines are created by OCTO. We operate indirect auctions for interconnection lines, and we receive requests for study of interconnection access and try to maximize the efficiency of operations in Japan. And the third mission is monitoring nationwide conditions of supply, demand, and network system operations. Around the clock, 24/365, we conduct monitoring and we centralize all of the information on nationwide basis. And when the supply-demand situation exacerbates by transferring power between operators through power interchange, we try to secure stable supply. Next, let me now move on to describing the current status of the Japan power system. We may not be a large country, but the length of our land is quite long. We are a narrow and long archipelago spanning 2,000 kilometers from east to west. And one salient characteristics is the gap in frequency between east and west, 60 hertz versus 50 hertz. And the frequency converter stations are used in between. And also, we hardly have any natural resources, and therefore, we are dependent almost 100% on imports. And therefore, depending on the need of each region, the supply is secured. And also, there's not really much gap between regions in terms of energy mix or power generation mix. And therefore, by transmission through interconnection lines, there was not the benefit of reducing cost, and that is why that did not lead to expanding the capacity of interconnection lands. Only when there is contingency, interconnection lines were used for power interchange between regions. But as the share of renewables increase going forward, the amount generated in each region will probably begin to differ. There will be a gap. And therefore, OCTO is trying to come up with a long-term policy of cross-regional nationwide interconnection. And based upon that long-term guideline, frequency converter stations between Tokyo and Chubu, Tohoku and Tokyo, as well as Hokkaido and the main island will be planned. And we are taking steps in order to implement those plans of developing the infrastructure for interconnection. The sixth strategic energy plan was adopted by the government, which is described on this page. Japan's energy supply is currently in a period of major transformation. Reliability is the priority, stable supply is the top priority, but at the same time, it has to be environmentally friendly and affordable economically. And in order to achieve those goals, and objectives. This is the energy mix that we are trying to achieve. More specifically, by 2030, 46% GHG reduction is the goal, and 36 to 38% will be the share of renewable energy. That's the goal for 2030. And another goal is carbon neutrality by 2050. And we are trying to maximize the share of renewable energy as the main power source. So one guideline is to increase the share of renewables to 50 to 60%. And therefore, we have to overcome various challenges, such as increasing the transmission capacity in the power system. And based upon such status quo, let me introduce to you some of the initiatives in the area of connect and manage. In order to respond to various changes in the environment through introduction of renewable energies, we have to maximize the use of existing transmission infrastructure to secure flexibility and improve and facilitate efficiency in the existing network. And therefore, ACTO has been engaged in connect and manage related initiatives. At the bottom of the page, we give you some examples, but N-1 intertrip and non-firm access are two areas where efforts are being made in order to maximize the utilization and efficiency of the existing transmission infrastructure. So, let me first of all take up N-1 intertrip scheme. Please take a look at the left-hand side diagram. To date, 100 megawatt times 2 circuits. If one of those circuits face some kind of contingency, then that would leave only one circuit of 100 megawatts. So, if 2 circuits are operating, 200 would have been supplied. But if this is left untouched, what would happen in terms of contingency? So, assuming contingency, we only supplied 100 using only one line in peacetime. But then we are trying to apply the right-hand side diagram. In other words, 200 megawatts being supplied, and if contingency occurs, then detect the incident and use the one circuit that's still working. So, in non-contingent period, 200 megawatts are supplied, and the basic concept of N-1 intertrip scheme is to increase the capacity of non-contingent times. And in 2018, we began to apply this for special high voltage new systems, and since fiscal year 2022, we expanded the scope to new power sources with high voltage connection. Next, another initiative of connect and manage is non-firm access and redispatching. Please take a look at the left-hand side figure. Any given time, transmission was possible for all power plants, ATC. But the threshold is approached in limited time, and therefore, for the other periods, there was unused availability of capacity. So that means that if there is a grid, then supply can continue. So when the grid is tight, we commit that generation will be suspended. But if the operations are smooth, then we continue. That is the non-firm access. And since January 2021, we began this on a pilot basis for trunk transmission systems that faced a shortage in transmission capacity, but we will expand this to local grids. Firm connection. In the case of firm access, at any given time, they were never given the order to suspend generation. But just because the access is firm doesn't mean that it's economically efficient. So, rather than having a policy of firm access constantly being connected based upon the principle of economic efficiency, keep the efficient ones and reduce generation in not so efficient ones. So there were rights for interconnection. So abandon that right and connect something else. Of course, economic guarantee would be provided to those who abandoned the rights. And based upon such initiative, we are trying to maximize the use of existing infrastructure in order to improve efficiency, especially economically rational power generation, renewable energy with almost zero marginal cost. And finally, let me touch upon the master plan of transmission system expansion. This diagram describes potential and demand. And at the center of the main island, there is capacity, but there's significant demand. But what about the northern island, Hokkaido or Kyushu? You can see that the capacity far outperforms the actual demand, which means that renewable power generated could be supplied from the north to Tokyo or from Kyushu to Kansai and Chubu. And as I said, to date, under the grid system, regional interconnection was not robust, so therefore the system could not respond to these operations. Thus, we need a master plan by assuming various scenarios. And currently, debate is underway for the grid system of 2050. 45 gigawatts of renewable energy is the assumption. And under this case study, 3.8 or 4.8 trillion yen of investment will be required. And in order to achieve carbon neutrality, by maximizing the proportion of renewable energy in the mid to long perspective, it is very important to build up the robustness of the transmission system. Finally, to summarize, OCTO has been performing its duties in accordance with the purpose to maintain a stable supply of electricity and render power supply system as efficient as possible from a neutral and impartial position. Accommodating the growing adoption of renewable energy is also an urgent matter to be addressed in order to achieve carbon neutrality in the future. We will proceed with various efforts that show the ideal figure of electricity network and realize it based on the mid to long-term perspective. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Oyama. And we will now continue with Mr. Shingawa from the Electricity and Gas Market Surveillance Committee. And Mr. Shingawa will talk about the electricity market, the status, and the next step forward. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I am Shinkawa, Secretary General, Electricity and Gas Market Surveillance Commission, METI. Thank you for the kind introduction, Minister Councillor Sundström. Thank you very much for inviting me to the meeting organized by the Danish Embassy and the Renewable Energy Institute. Peter Taxo Jensen, Ambassador of the Danish Denmark, and Christopher Betzo, the DG of the agency. President Thomas Kobe, thank you for the interesting presentation. Mr. Oyama of OCTO has discussed about the transmission in Japan and about the larger introduction of variable energy. In October 2020, the former Prime Minister Suga announced that Japan will go carbon neutral by 2050. And therefore, as a METI regarding the renewables, we will aim for maximum introduction, but ensuring stable supply to the population. Today, because we have our Denmark colleagues here today, I shall introduce the power system here in Japan to talk about the structural reform and regarding the efforts to introduce and connect variable renewable energy, how important this step is. I will talk to our Danish colleagues. I will talk about the latest situations. First of all, about the overall situation of supply and demand in Japan. At the Commission, the supply and demand of the power and the electric source structure, we are not responsible for that, but this is the background information. It is not on the slide, but the power demand, ever since the Second World War, it has continued to rise. By fiscal 2014, 1.3 kilowatt hour has been reached. In 2011, there was the Great East Japan earthquake and the Fukushima Daiichi incident. There was tight supply, and there were orders to restrict the use of power, and it went down by saving effort. And 90.74 billion was the latest figures. With the low growth of material industry and by energy saving since 1990, the industrial sector consumption has gone down. The commercial and the household has been the large users. Fiscal 2020, the mix, the coal 31%, LNG 39%, oil 6.7%, hydro 7.8%, and new energy 12.0%, nuclear 3.9%. Because of the 2011 incidents, from September 2013, nuclear is not used. LNG and the coal accounts for the majority of the mix. Regarding the nuclear power plants, in August 2015, the Sendai reactor number 1 restarted in Kyushu, and some reactors have restarted. Currently, there are 10 reactors that have restarted. Regarding the renewable, there was the FIT. From 2012, it has increased by 2012, 30.9 billion kilowatt hour, 2020, 119.9 billion kilowatt. Professor Oyama has discussed the situation. I will just focus on the specifics. The Japanese power system, before the World War, there were many private companies that were forcibly integrated. And in 1939, there were Japan Generation and Transmission Company, and there were 9 distribution companies. And after the Second War, in 1951, it was reorganized into 9 vertically integrated companies, and they became the monopolies. From 1972, when Okinawa was reverted, Okinawa Power was included, and now there were 10 vertical operators. But then there was the unbundling, and the distribution transmission became the 10 TSOs. One of the characteristics is the different frequencies, as President Oyama of Octo mentioned, west 60 Hz, east 50 Hz. In the case of Hokkaido, it is the same 50 Hz, but it is not synchronized. Hokkaido is independent, isolated 50 Hz. So interconnection capacity is not sufficient. In particular, there is a restriction of interconnection between the 60-50 as well as the isolated Hokkaido. This is the retail market liberalization. From the 1990s, there has been phased market liberalization. IPP started in 1995, but for the special high voltage that went into force in 2000, 2004, 2005, and this is showing how it was expanded. In 2011, when the earthquake and Fukushima incident occurred, from April 2016, the market has been full liberalized, where there is a full choice of suppliers. However, mainly in the family, for the low voltage customers, there is the transition regulated price, and therefore the users can select from where to purchase the power. Ever since the 2011 earthquake, on the fifth power market reform, this was the roadmap. In September 2015, our commission was established. From April 2016, retail went fully liberal. April 2017, the neutralization of the transmission and the distribution was introduced. This is the imbalance settlement. There was the 10 TSOs when we started the liberalization. So 2000, when we started the partial liberalization for the special high voltage, until March 2016, it was the TPA model, the third-party access method. For the new entrants, their own power source or bilateral contact or what they have financed from the power exchange, and within 30 minutes, the supply-demand were balanced, and for the imbalance, the TSOs would supply as penalties. From April 2016, with the full liberalization for the new entrants and for the existing companies, they had to settle the imbalance, and therefore the condition became the same for new entrants and the utilities. Balancing groups have been introduced, and therefore, under the Japanese system, we do have a similar balancing group model as is available in Europe. Regarding how to set the imbalance price, this is based on the spot price, but as of April this year, the settlement price is now based on the cost. The balancing market has been established, and the settlement price is based on the cost. So now a new system from April this year. And this graph shows the market share of the new entrants. As of October 2021, the new entrants' total share was 21.7%, and low voltage 23.8%, extra high voltage 20.3%. So gradually, basically, there is a rise in new entrants. I will come back to this later, but from the latter half of last year, because of the huge energy price hike, the spot prices are rising, and there are increasing number of new entrants who are going out of business. As of June this year, there has been 16 defaults or dissolution of the organizations. There are 69 such institutions who have liquidated. Japan has started multiple new markets. In Japan, JEPX was established from 2005. Day-ahead market and the forward market has been introduced. From 2009, hour ahead has been introduced. And TOCOM, the Tokyo Commodity Market, and EEX, a future market, is available. And the token future market from September 2019, it started on a pilot basis, and as of January this year, it has started full trading. The capacity market started in 2020, and Octo started the auction, and payment will start from 2024. Non-fossil trading value market, in May 2018, it was introduced for FIT. From April 2020, the non-FIT, non-fossil trading, has also started. Regarding the integration of variable renewable energy, I will talk about the importance and significance of this. Traditionally, in Japan, regarding the generators, the capacity was first come, first served to access the capacity. In order to ensure transparency and equity for all power sources, it was first come, first served, and you will win the contract. That would mean higher foreseeability, but then when there are new entrance applications, it was not possible to connect to the grid until enhancement was made. So the way of how to think about the grid operation, and we have focused on how to maximize the use of existing capacity, and Japanese connect and manage, and N-1 intertrip scheme has been introduced, and non-firm access also has been introduced. Mr. Oyama has discussed already, so I shall not go into details, but under first come, first served, for the renewable with non-firm access, then the existing contract, like a coal thermal, would be given priority, and therefore, in the case of congestion, the renewable with lower marginal cost would must be given priority than fossil. And therefore, by using the balancing power and in order to eliminate congestion, the redispatching method is planned to be introduced. At the Commission, by redispatching method, the cost sharing is under discussion. Under redispatching method, the renewable operators who receive the order for redispatching, with the revenue as it is, the pre-registered kilowatt-hour unit price will be used for the settlement, and therefore there should be no loss when the renewable operators have to redispatch. But the alternative power suppliers, the TSO, will have to settle, and the additional burden will occur on the side of the TSO. At the Commission, the Advisory Committee has discussed, and there was idea that the generators in the congestion area would pay for the burden, but we have decided that the tariff wheeling charges will be utilized, and the revenue cap, which will be introduced from fiscal 23, the actual cost will be added on to the wheeling tariffs. Under the redispatching method, in the real-time balancing, it will continue to use that, and the TSO will share the burden to eliminate congestion, and therefore the redispatching will be a transition method, and beyond that, either nodal or zone type of market-based congestion management will have to be considered in the future. This should be the future step as we try to improve the market. Some of the recent events that has attracted our attention. I am conscious of the time. I will not go into too much details. But first of all, the tight supply and demand and the spike in the energy price. COVID-19 and the improvement by graduating from COVID and by Russia's aggression in Ukraine, LNG prices have spiked, which, of course, has strongly impacted the Japanese energy market, and therefore we are conducting our surveillance of the market, both about the price and the volume. Plus, the volatility is rising. How to protect the consumers and the users. In this regard, we also have to strengthen our surveillance. And about the review of the last resort, the ultimate guarantee, the rule has to be improved, changed, so that the so-called power refugees can be helped. There should not be too much concentration to a particular supplier. Finally, the revenue cap system is under study as a new network tariff regulation. By approving a certain estimated revenue and capping the revenue, the tariff charges will be designated, which is to achieve maximum cost efficiency and a sufficient investment. So regarding the coming 5 years of estimated revenue, the discussions are ongoing by the experts. I did not go into the details of all of my slides, but we wish to maximize the use of renewables, but ensure the stable operation of Japanese power market, and it also must be cost efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shingawa. Yes, then now we will start the panel session. And first, I would like to welcome Mika Obayashi from the Renewable Energy Institute on the stage to take the seat next to me. And then Mr. Okamoto from TEPCO Power Grid, please take the seat next to Mika. And then Mr. Shinkawa, if I can ask you to stand up again, go to the stage. And then Mr. Bötzau, please come to the stage. And Mr. Takahashi to take the next seat. And then Mr. Kunimatsu from JPEX, please also. And then online, we have Mr. Kimura from the Renewable Energy Institute, and we have Mr. Peter Markussen from Energinet in Denmark participating as well. Mika, will you lead from here?
Thank you, Mr. Suni, for the kind introduction. In the first half, we heard various comments from the speakers. Thank you very much. Mr. Christopher Bötzau, you spoke in the first half, and also Shinkawa-san, you spoke in the first half as well, but two of you will also be participating in the panel discussion. Thank you for that. There were many points raised, salient points raised in the first half. I would like to simply ask questions. Sorry for that surprise, Mr. Bötzau. A few questions. In Japan, for example, renewables, especially VREs, the higher the proportion, then the more fossil fuel is needed. That's one view. But Mr. Bötzau, even if it is variable, you said independence can be improved, even with higher proportion of variable renewable energy. So what do you think about the relationship between variable renewable energy and other sources? And next, grid flexibility was raised, and especially the point that you had asserted is interconnection with other countries. We don't have any international interconnectors in Japan. How can we achieve that? Even if it's not international interconnector, flexibility of the grid system would be important. So if you could comment on those 2 points at the outset of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, about renewables and independency. If you look to our neighboring countries, Germany, about half of the households are heated up by natural gas. If you look to the Netherlands, it's 90% of the households that are heated up by natural gas. And Germany does not produce any natural gas by themselves. So it gives you a dependency on foreign countries. In Denmark, we also have natural gas, but much less in the households. And we have a lot of heat pumps. We have the district heating, which is supported by renewable energy, especially electricity from wind and solar. So when I look at the current energy crisis in Europe, it's clear to me that having so much renewable in the energy system gives you a stronger stand than our neighboring countries who are dependent on fossil fuels from other countries. And the answer from Europe in this energy crisis, if you listen to the EU Commission, is more renewables. It's better for the costs of the consumer because it gives you the low price. It's better for the climate. We need a carbon neutral society in 2050. And it's much better for the security of supply, and especially security and energy, because you're not dependent on other states that maybe are friends one day, but in coming years will turn into enemies. And the second question about interconnectors. Well, I come from Denmark. We are 6 million inhabitants. If I look at Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, we are 35 million inhabitants. And if you look at Germany as well, it gives you almost 120 million inhabitants. And this is our energy system, actually. This is how we are connected. And that's equal to Japan. So I'm not here to say that you can copy the system of Denmark because we're too small. But in my opinion, you can be compared to a continent, or half of the European continent. And I think that's the mindset that I bring into this, that you have so much possibilities, hydro, offshore wind, solar, nuclear. And combining this, I think you have a huge potential for having a stable renewable energy system.
ございます。先ほど
Thank you very much. Octo President Oyama-san delivered a presentation, and he was very selective in the words he used. But one clear message that he tried to deliver was, so far, uniform energy mix existed in all of the different regions in Japan. But with renewables increasing as an economically efficient power source, then the energy mix will begin to appear different between regions and districts. So in that sense, interconnector stability as well as grid stability are important. And with interconnection, like interconnection in Europe, there has to be nationwide cross-regional operation in Japan. I think that was the message. By maintaining flexibility, variable renewable energy can be introduced. And this is something that has just begun in Japan. So I would like to go ahead with the conversation based upon that assumption. We have approximately 50 minutes. So many of the panelists have prepared some documents, but I would like to give the floor to those who haven't had the opportunity to deliver presentations yet. to my left is Mr. Okamoto. So please go ahead, Mr. Okamoto. What's the challenge today? What kind of flexibility is necessary? Thank you very much. Okamoto of TEPCO Power Grid. Thank you for inviting me to this venue. Already there have been several presentations, so what I say may overlap, but could we share the PowerPoint that I had sent to the organizers? Partly in way of self-introduction, I would like to describe what we've been doing. In 2017, I published co-authored Utility 3.0, a book, and energy and decarbonization or distribution, digitalization are the themes that the book touches upon. And also deregulation in energy market or democratization may be a better word, and especially in the Japanese context with population declining, that's another issue. So there are 5 issues, and in the world of utility, a new stage dimension of 3.0 will occur. That's what we wrote about, as indicated on the very left. At that timing, Uber, Airbnb, such platform-related matching services were emerging. This is what we refer to as sharing economy, and we advocated that that kind of concept has to be introduced in the world of utility. You see that big question mark, but we didn't know what it would be like for implementation. And we were assuming local markets. Uber or Airbnb matching system is quite simple. It's just connecting travelers with vacant rooms. But in the case of utility like PV or large-scale thermal power generation, for example, solar of houses is only a few kilowatts, but then large scale would be the gigawatts. So there's several factor of differences, and then there are industries with plants running. On the other hand, there are personal homes, and then in terms of devices, there are EVs and heavy trucks. So with such difference in the objects, how do we do the matching? That was unknown back then. But to a certain extent, we were assuming what kind of players would become necessary. That was 5 years ago when I published that book. Now 5 years have passed, and during that period, there was demand tightness, and TEPCO caused some inconveniences to our customers, and also PV has increased. 2011, after 2011, PV has increased. 17 gigawatts or over PV is managed by TEPCO, and 90% is distributed energy that's used in the distribution network. And we think that there will be further increase of PVs. And as mentioned by Oyama-san, offshore wind will also increase. And this diagram describes distribution and transmission. They are divided. At the bottom, you can see the transmission network, inter-area operation, so it says. And OCTO is preparing the master plan and expanding the infrastructure for flexibility on cross-regional basis. Flexibility trading has already begun, but in the world of DSO, there will be more such trading. On the other hand, with more distribution, in the case of TEPCO grid system, in the world of DSO, as indicated on this diagram, the devices will be more various and diverse, and the stakeholders will be diverse. So grid edge device would also begin to offer flexibility, and thus energy management will have to be embedded into diverse devices. And at the DSO level, local markets will most likely be created. And energy and flexibility will simultaneously be traded in such trading market, and there will also be national market. And the national government is hosting debates on energy and flexibility simultaneously being optimized. So in a symmetric level, local meaning many local regions in Japan also occurring at the national level as well, which will incentivize the market to become more active. And that will begin to provide the flexibility necessary to fulfill the goal of carbon neutrality. And at our company, since the beginning of this fiscal year, based upon support from NEDO, DR optimization, 8 organizations have begun a demonstration project. So we will continue to study the possibility, and by around 2030, we are hopeful that these concepts will actually be implemented. So thinking about the combinations of various initiatives, we are beginning to see what we were not able to vision 5 years ago. Sorry, at the beginning, that was what I had wanted to say.
Indeed, the advancement is rapid. I understand. Then from Tsuru University, Professor Takahashi, if you would please comment about how to transform for variable energy interconnection. It is your turn, please. And he also has his slides.
Thank you. My name is Takashi of Tsuru University. I cover energy policies, especially in the context of introduction of renewable energy. 12 years ago, I went to Denmark. That was the first country that I went to conduct a study on the situation in other countries. And 12 years ago, I visited the Energy Agency of Denmark. And 10 days ago, for the first time in 10 years, I visited the authorities once again. And I was very, very surprised and impressed about the progress in Denmark. And now at the beginning of this event, we heard about the progress in Denmark from the Director General of the Danish Energy Agency. But as I said, as I write at the very top, many Japanese would think, oh, it's only possible because it's Denmark with only a possibility of 5 or 6 million. Many Japanese people will use that as an excuse, but I don't think so. I would rebut. Why? First of all, although people haven't gone so far to indicate this point, but first we have to think about the market. Market signals are there in order to match demand and supply for stability. And since the emergence of Nord Pool, that's been a very important message. And Japan has completely liberalized the market, and it's possible to introduce it in Japan if we can build a healthy and sound market like Nord Pool. So Kunimatsu-san, please work hard. So we will reach that stage. So that's one effort that we need to make. And the second point is interconnected power system operation, which has been one of the topics that has been frequently touched upon since the beginning of this seminar. Europe is connected continentally, but there's the undersea cable also providing interconnection with various islands of the Scandinavian countries. And as the Director General said, if we put together Scandinavian countries and the population of Germany, the size of the population would be about par with Japan. And Japan is an archipelago. We have Hokkaido, Honshu, and there's the constraint of 60 versus 50 hertz, but we can think about contemplating united, integrated interconnection to provide market. So President Oyama, if Octo can think about that further and provide for a good master plan, then we can also attain a power system that makes full use of interconnection. And the third lesson that Japan has to learn is, while Denmark has constantly had a consistent vision, Japan's vision has not been so consistent. The Director General said that we learned in Denmark from the first oil crisis. And we, the Japanese, were really blown by the oil crisis back then. But unfortunately, that didn't trigger us to go towards the direction of renewable energy. And also, the difference is natural gas. Denmark continued to export, but even with natural gas, you developed renewable energy, and that wasn't for decarbonization purely, but for energy independence as well. I heard that from Danish people. And that is why the impact from the Ukrainian war is relatively lightweighted in the case of Denmark. So that's one lesson that we can learn. Just because Denmark is small, that doesn't mean we can't do what Denmark is doing. So centering around renewable energy, independence and decarbonization can both be achieved, which is an important lesson that we can learn from Denmark. So these are the three learnings that we need to learn from Denmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Takahashi. Indeed, in the first half, we heard about the operation of the transmission grid, about the price signal, how to utilize the market in order to expand the connection use of renewables. Thomas, President Kobe mentioned, but rather than the fuel price, when the power is cheaper, then heat will be generated. In the case of Japan, mostly it is fossil fuel for power generation, and therefore, the power cheaper than the fuel, it is difficult to imagine here in Japan. But if it is variable renewable energy, it could be cheaper than fossil-based power generation. So when that happens, how to accommodate in the market, that was a very important perspective. Having said that, may I go to Japan Electric Power Exchange, Mr. Kunimatsu, about the market and the renewables. Could we ask for your perspective, please? Thank you. Kunimatsu, Japan Electric Power Exchange. Thank you for the invitation. In Japan, we have started this market operation from 2005, so it is 17 years. About the connection of renewables, I mean, the market is established not only for the renewables, but whatever the power source, our exchange is neutral. Under that backdrop, the energy price is rising, and the wholesale price is also rising. Then the renewable has very low marginal cost, which means it would be a stronger option to sell on the exchange to enjoy revenue and gain. Finally, it's an opportunity. Having said that, not much renewable power is sold on the exchange. Why? Because in Japan, FIT was existing. The more you generate, the more you earn. And the foreseeability by the operators or estimate, a forecast, or adjustment of the volume sales, there was a lack of effort because FIT, you could earn as much as you had generated. And otherwise, if it is sufficient with the amount that you've generated, you have to purchase. Without such mechanism, it would not be sold at a good price. It's whether there is imbalance or not. And now FIP has been introduced, and that is traded on the market. And we do expect that trading will expand. But because of the traditional FIT, there was not much activity on the market. By further utilizing the market, we hope that the renewable operators will go through the learning curve, and I wish that they would utilize the exchange. So how to use the market, how to use the exchange, it is incumbent upon us to communicate and advocate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. European market versus the Japanese market. We can't do a one-for-one comparison. What's the power capacity of the market? There are differences, and later we would like to hear comments on the differences between those markets. Now, Mr. Seiichiro Kimura, Senior Researcher, Renewable Energy Institute. Now, we have the goal of 250 100% renewable energy and decarbonization, and we have a study group. An interim report has been issued by the study group. So, Kimura-san, can you introduce to us that report as well and make your initial comment? Thank you. I am Kimura, Senior Researcher of the Renewable Energy Institute. The institute is serving as the secretariat of the Power Grid Study Group for decarbonization through renewable energy. And I would like to touch upon various findings that we have gained through the activities of the study group. Now, talking about the study group, the goal is 2050 carbon neutrality, and renewable energy must become the center of demand and supply. Then, what kind of grid is necessary, and how can we secure flexibility? It's chaired by Professor Takahashi, who's here on this panel as well. And also the members include Kato-san, President of Japan Wind Power Association, Professor Kikawa, Professor Tsuji, Professor Matsumura of University of Tokyo, Associate Professor Wakayama and Obayashi, as well as Okamoto-san and Miwa-san. Now, various points are being studied, and let me introduce some of the points that are being studied by the group. President Oyama touched upon the master plan, and we are taking up the scenario under the master plan. We are conducting a study based upon the Octo master plan, and more than one model is being studied, but Octo uses ABB simulation software, and between Hokkaido and Tokyo, if we build an interconnecting line, what would be the cost and benefit? That kind of simulation is being done by our study group. And about the conditions, as President Oyama said, 340 gigawatt by 2050. If that's the assumption, then between Hokkaido and Tokyo, the interconnected, it's not B by C, but B minus C. In other words, the gap between benefit and cost per annum, what would that be? And the unit is 100 million yen. Vertically, annual average, and horizontally, capacity of expansion between Hokkaido and Tokyo. If there is no interconnection, then that's 0. 4 gigawatt, 8 gigawatt, 12 gigawatt, and per 1 gigawatt, about 250 billion Japanese yen is the cost that's been estimated by Octo, so B minus C. At 4 gigawatt, then the benefit will outperform the cost, according to our scenario. Further, if we aim for 100% renewable energy, the benefit will be even larger than what is plotted here, according to our simulation. Further, flexible demand and storage battery installation could be introduced, even without the interconnected, more specifically EV charging, residential heat pump, storage, or hydrogen production. Based upon the current actual demand, if we use those combinations and estimate the benefit by combining For example, if we introduce that in Hokkaido and Tohoku output control, total amount of curtailment is the vertical axis, and curtailment will be effective in Hokkaido, or no, in Tohoku, but not in Hokkaido. But if we only think about battery storage only, then that is introduced on the supply side as well. So there will be curtailment. So such benefits have been estimated. So what kind of total benefit can we enjoy if we combine these initiatives? We are doing such estimates, and we are preparing to issue a report. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a simulation based on calculation and simulation. For example, from Hokkaido to Tokyo, 4 gigawatt interconnection, if that is established, it is expected to be very effective. And once again, I am sure that there will be another opportunity to learn about the outcome. And I have kept you waiting long. From Denmark, Senior Director, Associated Activities, Energinet, Mr. Peter Marksen. Thank you very much for waiting. Could we switch his screen on, please?
I've not brought a slide, but
ありがとうございます。ピーターさん、今まで
Peter, as you observed the discussion so far, may we ask for your observation? Energinet also is a transmission operator in Denmark. Your turn, please.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate here online. And sorry for not being able to be there in person, but I will actually go to Japan here on Thursday and continue the Danish engagement with our partners in Japan, and very much looking forward to that. And also thank you very much for the presentations this morning or afternoon for you. It's been very interesting to learn about the status of the electricity markets and build out of transmission grid and renewables. Seen from my view, I have 3 points I would like to state. One is on, say, the interconnectors that have been discussed, and as mentioned by Christopher Bøtzau, you can say Denmark is a kind of a one TSO compared to Japan, where we then say connect with the neighboring TSOs. And there have been much discussion in the last years and also right now due to this energy crisis we see, whether to actually restrict imports or exports. And the discussions are quite clear that interconnectors, they actually help and support security of supply. Because we need to help each other. It will be even more expensive and even more difficult if we were just to have security of supply in the Danish borders. So there is a large value both in money, but also in security of supply. And that is mainly due also to European rules on that at least 70% of capacity on the interconnectors should be made available for the markets. And also there is this other regulation that you cannot just cut off an interconnector. If you really have a critical situation, you actually, as a last resort, need to reduce consumption in your own area before you can actually do an interconnectors. And that is a very strict way to looking at the interconnector, because in the European case, we need to rely on the interconnectors. So that's my first point. The second point is on flexibility from the consumer side of view, and with electricity markets, they create transparency. And I wanted to show you something here live on the screen, and I'm not sure if you can see me now and can see it, but this is just from my phone. I think it's a bit difficult to see, but I can follow my day ahead price each hour and my own consumption. Due to we have smart meters with hourly metering and hourly payment. So I look at my electricity prices each day, and then I then consider when to turn on my washing machine and do my laundry and do the cleaning, just to make sure that I use the cheapest hour. And I can also see whether my electricity is green or whether it's black. So this gives me transparency as a consumer, and I can react on that each day. And I think that is necessary also to have the flexibility, not just in the critical situations, but in general. And it has very large value both for you as a consumer, but also for the society to give security of supply. So this is also part of the digitalization that we as a system operator is supporting, where we are making a lot of data on electricity prices and information on share of renewables from each hour, making that available both for private persons, but also for businesses that then develops these apps that can be used through your telephone, and you can be flexible. So that's my second point, consumer flexibility through transparency in electricity prices. Then my third point is that we also now see a development where companies would like to use green electricity so they can sell green products. And that can be everything from noodles to wind turbines that they would like to show that they're being produced on green electricity. And here we need to be aware again that we still have the flexibility in the system, because we see through these certificates and also to be able to show you have green electricity, there are a large number of PPAs being developed, power purchase agreements, and there you might reduce the transparency, you might reduce the incentive to be flexible. So there it is very important that when you start building, or I know you are already also having green certificates, that you make a system that really supports the flexibility and supports the security of supply as well. They need to go hand in hand, so that you're not, as a consumer, just buy a certificate and then you think everything is okay, now my power is green. You also need to support the flexibility. You need to support your system. So that's the 3 points from my side, and I'm really looking forward to follow the development in Japan, and also I know that we can learn from you as well. So thank you for inviting me here today.
Peter さん、ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Peter. As you said, he's in Denmark. He will be in Japan shortly, and next week he will be exchanging views with various stakeholders. We have 12 minutes left, so I will only be able to ask one comment from each of you, but having listened to the conversation so far, many of you talked about flexibility, and especially Peter, what you just mentioned was a great summarization of what the panelists have said so far. One is flexibility through interconnectors, and that would lead to security of supply. And even in Denmark, that has been impacted by the energy crisis, that has been very effective in securing the stability of supply. And in the case of Japan, as many have said, we don't have international interconnector, but with interconnection being secured within our nation, we may be able to achieve security of supply like what prevails in Europe. And on the second and third issues, transparency in power trading, that would lead to price signals being received by the consumers, and that would add to the flexibility of the demand side. In other words, the behavior of consumers, and that contributes to higher security in supply. And on the net, any given time, you can see what the current price is on the net. And secondly, power tracking is well done, and certificates are being issued. So by trusting such certificates, having confidence, you can engage in trading, and that kind of stability is secured. that's one issue we need to think about in Japan. How is power being supplied? It's not easy to see at a glance how power is being supplied. And also, there's not well developed a picture of power generation. Thermal, coal, there's coal, gas, and as well as gas, but it's all bundled into thermal power generation, and the amount of power generated through thermal generation is not broken down. And also, Kunamatsu-san mentioned that all of the fuel sources will have to be treated equally in the market for trading purposes. On the other hand, national government has a goal of decarbonization. So such fuel source needs to be increased in the supply side as well as on the consumption side. So decarbonized fuel source, and in terms of low marginal cost, that would mean renewable energy. But through what kind of measures can we increase the proportion of such fuel sources in the market? That's one question that I would like to ask all the panelists. For example, with flexibility on the demand side, can we increase the proportion? Okamoto-san or Kunimatsu-san, either of you, can you make the comment? Then, let me go ahead. My comment will be short, and I'm sure Mr. Kunimatsu will have things to add. But as Kunimatsu-san had said, currently Japan has so far focused on FIT. So, in principle, TEPCO aggregated all of the supply from renewable energy operators and introduced that to the market. So the market mechanism was not in play to the fullest extent. That's reality. And unlike the West, Japan does not have this phenomenon like negative price. So if there is the phenomenon of negative price, then in a time where demand is low, then demand can be incentivized to be created in such hours. So on the demand side, there could be battery or flexibility. And that kind of demand side flexibility will be better used in Japan. So in comparison to Europe, market utilization hasn't developed to the fullest extent yet. But changing this system will require consensus. But in comparison to the time required to build large-scale infrastructure, it won't be as time-consuming. So frankly speaking, if you think about a large-scale grid for offshore wind, Professor Oyama-san is doing some research, and that would be time-consuming and cost-consuming. But on the other hand, market reform will be done more speedily, although it will require some time. So we can learn from the experience in Europe and in the United States and try to introduce market flexibility. And also, we are thinking about this kind of mechanism also being introduced in the distribution network as well. As I said, PV, 90% of PV is introduced in distribution, so we can assume congestion. And we can use market mechanism to resolve the congestion. So price signal can be issued in the distribution network, and that kind of mechanism can be done in our demonstration project. And just one point to add. Since 2008 and 2009, in preparing against introduction of PVs, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry has hosted study groups, and University of Tokyo has organized a group of demonstration. EcoCute, heat pump, water heater. If that's used during daytime, maybe we can introduce more PV. EcoCute, back then, was considered to be a tool for sales promotion of nighttime power. And when we said that it won't reduce the prices of daytime power, then people became against that idea, but it's become rather obsolete. And also, semiconductor supply is tight. Sunlight-based EcoCute has become a standard, and it's become a standard in the market, and that's linked to weather news. So on the previous day, based upon the weather forecast of the previous day, if the weather is fine the next day, that is taken into consideration to optimize the timing of boiling water. So on the device side, the readiness has improved. So if we can link the market development to such device progress, then I think more speedy trading can be achieved. 10 years ago, I was interested in the Danish Edison project. There was much wind power generated, so EV charging pattern to be matched to wind power generation. That kind of demonstration project was being implemented in Denmark, and we did the University of Tokyo project referring to that Danish project. But now we have so many EVs. As we try to go into the implementation phase, those are some of the challenges.
Thank you very much. The Tokyo Metropolitan Government subsidies for the solar panels, EcoCute installment is the condition for subsidies. So that way of thinking, I think, is spreading. Mr. Kunimatsu? And then followed by Mr. Shinkawa about the negative pricing, if I may invite you later. Thank you. Market price, if you access our website, there is real-time market price, so you can see when it is cheap or expensive. But then, under that price, it does not mean that consumer can use. There are the wheeling charges, access charges will be added on. What is the proportion of wheeling charge or access charge? So there's the power charge. If there is a 0.1 of the wholesale price, 0.01 yen of the wholesale, but that is not the sole price. There will be a wheeling charge, and lower the voltage, the specific price per hour will be larger. So whether you can consume when it is cheap, not necessarily. So the review of the wheeling tariff might be required in order to stimulate the demand in a way of linking it with the market price. Having said that, the energy price is rising and the wheeling charges are also on the right, and the renewable surcharge will be added on. And therefore, on the consumer side, to self-generate or self-consume is expanding. If this becomes expensive, then to distribute, it might be unexpected, but economically, it might become viable going forward. Regarding the negative pricing, in terms of our exchange, it is possible to accommodate negative price, but under the system of purchasing the surplus, so whether it is worthwhile to generate when it is cheap, or is it worth selling by paying, then why not sell and you just generate, and then there will be a purchase of the surplus. So in that environment, whether negative price is required or not. Regarding the surplus, in the world where there is a penalty, then with the negative pricing, the planned price will have to be made higher. Even if you pay, you have to raise the price. In that case, negative price might be useful. But in Japan, when there is no economic penalty on the surplus generation, maybe Japan has no reason to introduce negative pricing. Thank you, Mr. Shinkawa. About introduction of the renewable, the merit order and the demand supply management and congestion, those are the key dimensions. Regarding renewable, the marginal cost is extremely low, so that would be advantage. Congestion management, redispatchment, and the non-firm access should be very effective. Going forward, demand-supply management and how much will be the renewable flexibility is extremely important, and I fully agree. Earlier, as Dr. Okamoto mentioned, and there's the pumped hydro in Japan, because in Japan, hydro was very important, and it is also very important to expand our renewable share. About the negawatt, as Mr. Kunimatsu indeed mentioned, I do not think it is not possible, but there has not been a there has not been debate, so we shall have to discuss going forward.
Thank you. On the other hand, in specific network areas, output control is being done. And when storage battery is introduced, and that could be sold and traded, then it will create new business opportunities. We are running out of time. We have to close shortly. So I would like to ask specific questions to each of you, and this will be the final comment. First of all, Takahashi-san, having listened to what others have said so far, it's difficult to summarize, but what's the big lesson Japan should learn? Thank you. In one word, that's difficult, but Denmark was able to do it, so why not Japan? Of course, there are differing conditions, so we cannot copy exactly what Denmark has done. We may not be able to simulate some things that they have done. But just because Denmark is a smaller country, we shouldn't use that as an excuse. We should try to learn lessons we can apply. And Octo Master Plan was mentioned, which is one of the progresses that are being made in Japan. So I think we are going towards the right direction. But we need to speed up the progress, and I think that's a key. And one key word is flexibility. I think we've been hearing that today quite frequently, and that's very relevant to the market. To date, without thermal, with output control, VRE cannot be introduced. That used to be used as an excuse, but let's abandon that kind of concept. No matter how renewable is increased, we need to still rely on thermal, people said. But there is other ways to secure flexibility, like grid or distributed resources or sector coupling in the future. There are many ways of securing flexibility. There are candidate methodologies. So which methodology we use in what kind of combination, that could be determined by market price. But let's deny that without thermal power generation, we can't rely on VRE. Maybe it's not possible to increase the proportion of RE to 100%, but we can maximize it to close to 100%, which is necessary for decarbonization and essential for cost efficiency as well as for flexibility. And maximization of flexibility is the big lesson we need to learn and speed up.
Thank you. So time is until 5:30. Could you extend to 5:35? This panel will conclude at 5:31, which means 3 more minutes. Dr. Kimura, Dr. Okamoto, Mr. Kunimatsu, Mr. Shinkawa, 20 or 30 seconds each. And Peter, Christopher, your final comments, and we will conclude this part. So, Dr. Kimura.
Thank you. In 30 seconds. In the future, 2 gigawatt Tokyo-Hokkaido interconnector, that study has begun at the national government level. But why do we need to be particular about 2 gigawatt? Let's think about 4 gigawatt and also market integration as well. If those points could be also studied, sponsored by the national government, that would be effective. And we heard that those would be important, so I hope that that could be considered. Thank you very much. Okamoto-san, please. And after that, Shinkawa-san. Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me participate. Until last week, with Oyama-san in Paris, there was the major international conference on power, which I attended. And I think there is convergence of the global challenges faced by various countries. We are in the midst of energy transition, and all countries are faced with energy transition. This is a path of no return. And TSO or DSOs and various stakeholders are aware of that recognition. So initiatives done in other countries would be very relevant to other countries as well. So especially the examples of network and energy net. I visited your company in my missions, so we hope that we can continue our discussions. Just one point on flexibility. Takai-san, you said you don't need thermal, but flexibility depends on time range as well. And Sigray, they took this up as well. Long-term flexibility. Even in Europe, there are timings where renewable energy cannot be so powerful. What if demand surges? There's not enough storage capacity. And partly because of that, there is high hopes for hydrogen. But in reality, it's only thermal that can fill that gap. That's the reality we are faced with. So in the process of transition, this is something that we need to resolve. But thermal cannot disappear all at once right now. So how can we secure long-term flexibility is one challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Kunimatsu, Mr. Shinkawa, thank you for this opportunity. In terms of flexibility within Japan, I think there's a lack of flexibility on the demand side. When the renewable is not available, the consumer just has to be patient. So to suppress the consumption, there must be a better mechanism to consume when you wish to consume, but the variable renewable, to make them both compatible is important. So the demand side flexibility, I think, is important. In terms of market, when renewable is to be expanded, and on top of that, to ensure energy security, where the market can provide all that function is the question. Indeed, METI and ANRI, the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, are working on what market we need in Japan. So what is the desirable market that we have to continue to study, including ourselves? So we look forward to doing our best. And Mr. Shinkawa, thank you. Professor Takahashi mentioned about not thermal. I do agree with Dr. Okamoto. When the demand supply is tight, as it is today, and to restart what has not been in operation, how to ensure energy supply in this difficult situation, it is a very difficult time. And it might be partly a difficulty of time range, but for the time being, supply and demand must be managed, plus adding on more share of renewables. And the flexibility on the demand side, yes, it's whether Japan can really produce hydrogen. We are at a critical juncture. The material industry, energy industry, they have a lot of expectation over hydrogen, whether it is really going to be available in Japan or outside of Japan. Whether Japan can do something here will be critical. Japan really needs to do a lot for hydrogen. Thank you.
Not to rebut to what you've said, you talked about time range, but in Japan, renewable is only 20% and variable 10%. So the proportion of renewable is much lower in comparison to other countries. So that has led to this concept of thermal reliance in terms of time range. So I think more acceleration is necessary to introduce more renewable from that country. Christopher and Peter, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. We share obstacles, we share visions, and that's why I'm so happy to be here, because we have a close partnership with the Japanese government and METI. And if you need to hear more about the Danish do's and don'ts, then please do not hesitate to contact the embassy with Sune in front. And my good colleagues here that will gladly participate in further dialogue. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And also from my side, thank you very much for good presentations and discussions today. And I think my concluding words would be that there are no one solution here. There is a lot of tools that needs to be used, from offshore wind to solar to flexibility from consumption, carbon capture. Everything needs to be used, and that creates a very complex energy system. And that complexity can be very difficult to handle, and that is also where you then need the market or market tools, and also you need incentives for your tariff, and that is the discussions we have in Denmark at the moment, and in Europe, how to change or adapt our markets and tariffs to the more complex energy system. So, looking forward to go to Japan next week, and hope maybe I will meet some of you, and looking forward to the dialogue. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。それでは
Thank you very much. Now I hand over the microphone back to Sune-san, and I think we will have the closing remarks from President Ono.
We will conclude today's session here. And we will do that by having Tede Yuki Ono from the Renewable Energy Institute saying a few concluding remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ono, Renewable Energy Institute. I shall be brief. For all of you here and those of you online, thank you for the big participation. And DG Betsao and President Oyama of Octo, I thank all the speakers, including experts. There was a lot of discussion today. The most important lesson was currently Japan and the world are facing the energy crisis. In order to overcome and survive, introduction of large amount of VRE and reduce fossil, I think that was the key point. In Japan, efforts are ongoing, and as you have heard from the speakers today, Japan is working. However, on the whole, for Japan as a whole, for the Japanese government as a whole, for the Japanese power industry as a whole, I have to say that the effort might not be enough. However, the point is by 2050, which is 30 years from now, within Japan's power structure, renewable will only be 50 or 60%, according to the current plan, and that shows the lack of ambition. A renewable 50 to 6%, that's larger than today. However, by 2030 in Europe, they will reach that, and some of the European countries already have gone to 50 or 60% today. And renewable 100% in Japan, if we want to be close to 100%, according to the government, Japan has no land space and lots of other excuses, or that's intermittent. These are the excuses always mentioned. As we heard from Denmark, both two difficulties can be overcome. These difficulties are not difficulties, Denmark shows us. The lack of land space, onshore wind or solar PV, of course, that might need space. But the whole point is we are surrounded by sea. If you think about offshore wind, by 2050, the floating technology be fully possible. So we have no barrier or difficulty. About the intermittency, there were lots of difficulties. But what I was impressed was in Japan, we are not interconnected with other countries. But Japan is just like Denmark and the interconnection with Germany and the Scandinavian countries. The scale is the same. And in Japan, the pumped hydro, 27 gigawatt of water energy. UK, France, was it Germany? and the total is twice more than the total of those three countries. So using pumped hydro, then maybe not immediately 100%, but at least 80% of renewable, it should be technically possible, and I think many will agree. By 2050, it sounds far away, but as Dr. Okamoto mentioned, when we need to make the transmission, decision must be early to construct the hardware. So we need to continue this kind of constructive discussion, and at least we must reach 80% renewable. And I hope there will be a strong consensus and there will be concrete actions towards that. At our institute, we will do what we can. And regarding hydrogen, on Friday this week, our institute will release our report. So please do stay tuned on our activities. And may I close this session. Thank you very much indeed.
And then let's end this by giving a big applause to our panel here at the end and our speakers, all the speakers. And then it will be the end of this event, but stay tuned. There will be more to discuss in the future. And I will be, together with my colleagues, just around here, at least for the next 15 to a half an hour. So please come and say hi if you have some questions or you would like to have further dialogue with us. But first, a big applause. And we'll stop here.